the desert, they were looking for the living presence of God, and sacrificed whatever it took to achieve that.
Dost thou desire to be deserving of the angelic habit and to be ranked in the company of those who are living as monastics? Dost thou renounce the world and the things belonging to the world according to the commandment of the Lord? Wilt thou endure all the strain and tribulation belonging to the monastic life for the kingdom of heaven's sake? A new name has been given to you at this your second baptism.
My gracious guardian, Jesus, cleanser of my sins, Jesus, remover of my transgressions, Jesus, pardon my unrighteousness, Jesus, my hope, do not forsake me, Jesus, my helper, do not reject me, Jesus, my creator, do not forget me, Jesus, my shepherd, do not lose me, Jesus, Son of God, have mercy on me.
Everyday Orthodox with Elissa Bjeletich, a live listener call-in show where we share the stories of everyday Orthodox people as we get to know the members of the body of Christ. Join the conversation. We invite you to call in with questions at 1-855-AF-RADIO, 1-855-237-2346.
Welcome to Everyday Orthodox. We are here every Sunday night on Ancient Faith Radio. Unfortunately, we're not live tonight. We're actually recording this a little bit early, so you can't call in and join us tonight, but we are so excited to have you here and to introduce you to another Everyday Orthodox person. And we love to do that every Sunday right here on Ancient Faith Radio. We always get together and just meet someone new. The Orthodox Church is full of interesting people, and we get all divided up into different jurisdictions, and we might worship in different languages or in different traditions in a sense. But, we're all Orthodox, we're all the body of Christ, and it is so beautiful to get to know other people from across regions and jurisdictions. So I'm so glad that you've joined us. Bobby Maddox is here engineering with us, and I have the most wonderful guest. I think you're really going to enjoy her. Her name is Ariane Trifunovich Montemuro, and we're sort of family friends, but distantly, but I am so excited to have Ariane on the program. I think you'll really enjoy her. She's an artist, she's a writer, she's a podcaster, and she's just a person who is very passionate about the Orthodox faith. And I without any further ado, I won't say anything more, Ariane. I will let you introduce yourself a little bit as well. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Elissa. And I just want to thank you first of all, for everything you do for the faith. I find your work, all of your Orthodox educational programming and podcasts, the cards, all the things that you do so inspirational. I think I have everything that you've done. And I just feel so much like we're sisters to a degree. I always think we've got this short time here on earth. Let's do as much as possible to build God's kingdom.
Well, that is very kind of you. And you know what? I agree. I think of us as being very similar and being sisters in a lot of ways. And I think we know a lot of the same people actually kind of running around in the Serbian Orthodox circles. And so I'm excited as we're talking.
Definitely.
I have a feeling I'm going to recognize some names that you're saying. But it is really a joy to have you on the show. And I do want to make sure that people know the names of your books as we're getting started. One is I Shall Remember Thy Holy Name from Generation to Generation. A Serbian American woman awakens to Christ's call. And then the other one, this one I love as well, and I know a lot of our listeners are very interested in the Romanov family, and we've talked a lot about the Romanovs here on the program. Well, Ariane also wrote another book on the Romanovs, and this is a really good one. It's called Debt of Love. And it is, it goes, actually, your preface is by their Royal Highnesses Prince Vladimir and Princess Brigitte Karađorđević. Are they Serbian royalty?
Yes. He's actually the great grandson of Queen Victoria of England, and also his father was the grandson of the last king of Yugoslavia, the Serbian king Kraljević Aleksandar. So King Alexander, who was murdered in Marseille, I believe that was 1934, and his wife and I got friendly, believe it or not, on Facebook. It's amazing who you meet on Facebook. And we were going to meet up last summer when I went to Serbia, but they weren't in Belgrade at that time. I ended up going to his royal office and meeting his office manager and talking to them. And they have a deep connection to the Romanovs through his side of the family. He's actually has Romanov blood. And, we got to take a picture when we went to Serbia I don't know if many people know, in Belgrade, there's a beautiful statue of Tsar Martyr Nicholas II. So that was an honor. But they are just lovely people, and they're very modest and friendly and approachable as royals. I just love what they wrote, too. He wrote, I don't know if you enjoyed it, Elissa, but it was short, but it was to the point, because any Serb, especially of my generation, I said in my book, born 1965 and earlier, was raised with a very, very deep love of Tsar Martyr Nicholas II. And many people don't know that the issue of canonization for him and his family was actually brought up first by the Serbs in Leskovac.
Oh, I did not know that, but I'm not at all surprised. I know that the Tsar Martyr and his family were very beloved by the Serbs, and that is really neat. I love that you met a princess on Facebook. I have to say, you never know. You just never know.
You don't. That's for sure.
So, Ariane, I would like to start. Oh, go right ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. Can I tell you one other funny little thing?
I would love it.
Praying to the Tsar. I didn't have a book. I had the book. It was almost done, and I didn't have a cover. And I kept saying, "Oh, please, Tsar Nicholas, help me." I was talking to him like a friend. I don't have a cover. I know the book title. Everything was really clear, but I had no idea. And I know the Jacksons, Jonathan Jackson and his lovely wife, Elissa. And Anna, my daughter, got invited to their daughter's birthday party. And I went over there, and I didn't realize that they had gone abroad to the 100-year anniversary of the martyrdom of this beautiful family, the Tsar and his family. And when I walked in, we realized that we share a love for them. And Jonathan's wife, Elissa, said, "Oh my gosh, Ariane, we brought you something back from Russia." And she walks out with this cross. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, and it was from where they were murdered, the mine shaft where the bodies were, dumped and burned with gasoline. It's just horrible to even just recall how everything happened. But she gave me this little cross she brought back from there. And I looked at it. It was perfect because, a cover, you have a split second to look at something and it has to say everything. And the cover, it was a picture of the Tsar with a cross, and I love the little bell above there, and his name and the crown. And I really believe he answered my prayer, I'm one
That's
of a
beautiful.
multitude of people.
Right. That's amazing. That's lovely. And it does make a beautiful cover because you've got the cross right there on the cover. I love that. That's a good story. Well, so we want to hear your story as well. Where does your story start? Where were you born?
Well, I was born in Wilmington, Delaware. My father tried to apply for a job in the United States for, I think Daddy said it was 7 times he was denied. You know, in the 1950s, my parents always viewed themselves as political emigres. I was raised, I never heard the word immigrant, as strange as it sounds. They were born in the former Yugoslavia, my mother in Belgrade and my father in Visegrad, but he was only there a very short time and came as a baby to Belgrade. So they basically both grew up in Belgrade. But anyway, long story short, my father, you know, with the onset of communism, his dream was to get out of there. So he ran the border. It was, you know, him and his best friend, Paul Marsano, were shot at. Anyway, it took him a while, but he applied 7 times to come to this country and was denied. And finally, he was part of a team in Holland that invented the fabric banlon. It was a synthetic fabric. Now, if you've ever seen the show on Seinfeld, they kind of make fun of it, but banlon actually brought.
I was going to say, gosh, that sounds familiar. Why do I know that?
Does that ring a bell?
That's why.
You know, women in the 50s were so happy, like people like my dad invented that fabric because they didn't have to iron. Like there was a show called Gilligan's Island, and they wore a lot of those polo shirts that were made of banlon. And trust me, when I dismantled my mom's house when she got sick, it was, I've got like boxes of banlon, but I'm not the banlon heiress, so the company got all that. So anyway, Daddy came to Wilmington first, and then my mother came slowly. She was the last one in her family. She was detained in Paris, which is a nice place to be detained, but she had to wait. You know, it was the era of McCarthyism, and she was fleeing communism, but, you know, the first people they're going to suspect are college students, which she was one. So they actually met in this country, and then Daddy met Mommy and brought her from Gary, Indiana to Wilmington, Delaware, and after they married in St. Sava in Gary, Indiana. And that's where I was born. First my brother, and then I was born. And Wilmington, Delaware had 0 Serbs. Let me just say that. But I was raised with parents that were not, they were very international. Like it wasn't like everything Serbian. Like my father spoke Dutch and German. My mother spoke French, Serbian, English, Russian. I mean, she was a DuPont interpreter. So we had people, Dutch people. They were switching from language to language. I couldn't keep up as a kid. So anyway, my first true love, which I really believe laid the groundwork or rolled out the red carpet for my deep love for our Orthodox saints, was Anna Pavlova, the Russian ballerina. I read how she would cross herself before every performance, and how she she took care of her mother, and she was lover of beauty. And, you know, I've talked many times with Jonathan Jackson and his lovely wife about beauty. It just, beauty has a connection with God, truth, beauty. We could get in a whole nother show, but Anna is really the reason for my deep love for the saints, and knowing each life is so beautiful. And we're drawn, you know, I'm not drawn to the same saints you are, Elissa. We're all drawn to different saints to inspire us. But God gave them to us to help us in difficult times, and boy, do we need them now.
That is for sure. I'm sure we always need them, but we feel it right now, don't we?
Yes, you're right. You're so right, Elissa.
So you were raised in a home, your parents were Serbian immigrants, but really very international household, it sounds like.
Yeah.
So were you in the Serbian Orthodox Church, or were you in the Orthodox Church at all?
There was in Delaware, up until about age 12, we went to a Serbian church in Philadelphia called St. Nicholas. But, you know, it was almost 45 minutes to an hour drive, and we didn't go every weekend. But my parents were, very, they kept all the Slavas and everything. But back then, if you had asked me, I would have said I was Yugoslavian. That's the way we were back then. And within that, we were Serbian. So if you look in my diaries when I was 11, 12 years old, I wrote, I love hearing everybody speaking Yugoslavian. So that's why today, if I need a Bosnian or Macedonian or Slovenian, I'm just like, I love you. That's the way I was raised. We're just so happy to have somebody Slavic, Balkan.
Right. Well, and I think that's so true of most people before the wars, just thought of themselves. And the immigrants, in such small communities, little, Croatian, Bosnian, Serbian communities, everybody would get together and do, everyone had the same folk dancing and spoke the same language and ate the same food. And while there was an ethnic difference, it was really kind of one group. And all of a sudden, then it wasn't anymore. but I think here and there it comes back a bit.
Right. My mother was not really, both of my parents were very, very, like you said, international. Like, I didn't grow up doing the kolo. That they were like, not that they didn't appreciate it, the Serbian dance, I should say, but it was like they were just kind of into everything. I felt like our house was just filled with many different ethnicities, and I like that. I find that beautiful.
That's neat. That really is beautiful. It's wonderful. So as you're growing up, you are in the church, but it's a little bit distant. Did you grow up loving Orthodox? I hear you talking about the saints, and I can just sort of feel your passion for the faith. Have you always been like that?
I always loved our faith in terms of who I am, the icons, and I never knew the details of it, like history. But I knew, I saw my father, like, my parents, how reverent they were. My father always dressed with a tie. My mother always got like a zillion candles, and she would kiss each one before she pressed it into the sand. And it was beautiful. I would have never changed. I remember dating my husband, and we were at a bar, and my husband is Catholic. Our kids are Orthodox, but I said, the only way I can marry you is if the kids are Orthodox. And he said, sure. But there was no Ancient Faith radio. I didn't know anything. I love who I am. I identified so much with, there weren't any Orthodox role models back then. So that's why Anna Pavlova was very important for me. There was really nothing. Try to imagine growing up in a place where, like Wilmington, Delaware, you're not going to have zero Serbs. You are going to a church, but Serbs don't go to church every weekend. You know that. I mean, I'm not saying every Serb, but I'm saying a lot of them don't. I'm going to get in trouble on this podcast. Oh boy. But you understand what I mean,
but that's really true with any group, honestly, that all of us have, and even in a larger family, you'll have that. You'll have some members of the family who are very good about constant attendance, and then other families who love the church, but who are just not making it every week.
Right.
That's absolutely true.
I remember when I started, there was no Serbian church here when we first moved here, and after my mother moved here, I started going religiously every weekend, all the feast days, and my mother, she said, don't become a fanatic. And then she also said, are you sure this is an Orthodox church? Because she had never heard one in English. You have to imagine. You can't blame her.
Wow.
There was no Orthodox church in English when I was growing up.
That's amazing. That is amazing. Oh,
it is. So yes, I've always had a very deep faith. Yes. I haven't known as much as, say, maybe a convert knows, which I have great respect for. And I know that now, but I have even more love for my faith. But I would have never changed who I am. No. And I would have always loved that. Yeah.
Yeah. But, it's interesting because I find that a lot of people who are born into the faith, as you were, will say that, converts know a lot more than we, on the other hand, you just said, I would never change who I am, right? Like Orthodoxy is in you in a way. I think when a family has been Orthodox for many generations, especially in a household where people are pious and they love God, you get this sense of Orthodoxy as being an integral part of your identity. And that,
Yes, it is.
there's a lot to
I
be
agree.
said for that. There's a lot to be
Yeah.
said for growing up in a culture that has Orthodox sensibility about it. So, I
Right.
wouldn't be too
That's a
quick to
good
say,
point.
I don't know as much as converts, because in a lot of ways, you know a lot of other things that we are very
Well,
slowly picking up. we're working
you're
at
too
it.
kind, Elisa. I do have a lot of respect, really. I think it's an amazing thing. But, as you would say, I know you would agree with this, it's all of our faith. It's our
Yeah.
faith because it's the true church.
That's right. And if we
It's our
believe it's the
faith.
true church, then it can't be an ethnic pocket,
Right.
right? If it's the true church, we have to go
Exactly.
baptize all the nations. It's
Exactly.
just, that's how it
And
is.
that's
But
why I loved my mother raising me not to feel, we moved to North Carolina when I was 12, and there was no Serbian Orthodox church there. So they didn't make a fuss. They didn't say, oh, we're not going to move here because there's no Serb. My dad got a job there, and it was a good job. He wanted to move. So they said, oh, we'll go to the Greek church. And my mother taught the Greek priest how to do slava. I mean, I love that because I think it was so beautiful when he would come and he would mess up and Mommy would go, it's okay, just do this. But then again, my mom started making, I'm sure, forgive me for all the Greeks out there, especially my friend Fran listening, Paximadia, I'm probably not pronouncing it right. You could help me, Elisa.
Well,
But
I
my
could
mom
do it
started
wrong as
making
well.
Greek cookies. She was making
Isn't
Greek
that
cookies,
great?
and she's a Serb. But
That
that's
is
what
beautiful.
we should do. I
It
tell
is.
my kids, I don't care where you go, if it's China or Russia, you step into an Orthodox church, that's your home.
That's right. That's
Right?
absolutely right. So you were in, is it North Carolina or South Carolina?
Yeah, Burlington, North Carolina, a little
Oh, okay.
town, Burlington, North Carolina. We went to a little
Excellent.
Greek church there called, a shout out to St. Catherine's, which is still there. A very, very kind priest would come and do our slavas. We had no Serbs at our slavas.
Yeah.
We had Southerners. And
Well,
as my
and
parents would say, Anglo-Saxon, and they were so respectful.
Anglo-Saxon.
We love your traditions, and they were watching everything. What is this? What is that? But I felt a lot of love. I remember a lot of love when they would come.
No, I think
And
that's really neat. I think that's beautiful. And that's what our family did for a very, has done. We moved to Texas and we invited a bunch of Texans. And for a long time, we didn't have a Serbian priest in town. So the Greek priest came and did the Slava, and we just did it in English. And it was beautiful. It's a beautiful service, and
Right.
it's neat to be able
It
to
is.
share it. For our listeners
It
who
is.
don't know what the Slava is, the Serbs have a very special tradition that no other Orthodox people have, and that's called the Krishna Slava. And what it is that the family has one patron saint,
Yeah,
and then
patron
that
saint
saint
for the
is
whole
celebrated
family.
together. That way, instead of having 8 different name days in a house, you have just the one, and everyone celebrates it
Right.
together. It's really a
And
lovely tradition.
it is. And what's a little confusing is, for example, when people go up to receive communion, say at any Orthodox church you're thinking of, you can name, you would say your patron saint, say it was St. Mary of Egypt, you would say that. But for me, mine is St. Petka. So I say my name. I don't say St. Petka. It's just the Serbs don't do that. We say our name. So it's very beautiful, and it's an amazing thing. And in our church, I know we're not supposed to analyze and discuss dreams. But when I wrote my first book, I was writing it with an editor. I'd never written a book before, and Tim Weeks is really wonderful. He was helping me edit and helping me write parts of it because I had never written a book. And so we were meeting with a Serbian monk, Father Serafim Bjeletich, and it was so funny. Tim turned to him at one point and he said, is everybody like Ariane? Because she's got these dreams. I don't know, how do you explain these dreams? And Father Serafim said, well, we Serbs, no, they really do have dreams, especially if you don't ask for it. Sometimes there will come a dream from the Lord if it's not something that's looked for. But she is a little unusual. But that's what Father said. My husband that'll be a good joke for a little while. But anyway, one night when my mom was still in a nursing home and she was still pretty drugged up, I wanted to take her for the old calendar Christmas to the newly formed St. Petka Serbian Orthodox church in Nashville. And everybody thought I was crazy, really, because you could hardly lift her up. She was kind of hunched over. And I told my husband, Tony, and he said, Ariane, I really wouldn't. It's up to you. He's always very kind, but he expressed doubts, I should say. So I went to bed that night, and I started praying. I said, look, St. Petka, I'm just trying to get her. She can still walk to go to church. It's our Christmas on the old calendar, Serbian Christmas. Help me. So I went to bed that night. I forgot I did that dream. And I had this dream of a woman came to me, and her arms were outstretched, and it was like light emanating from her arms. And she had this Byzantine crown. It was like, I don't want to say dental molding, but it's like, those old.
I know just what you mean, though.
You know what I'm talking about?
It is. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Byzantine.
Absolutely. The ones you see in the icons. She had an icon crown.
Exactly. Right. Thank you. So I woke up, I thought, wow, that's an interesting dream. And I'm thinking, that wasn't the Theotokos. And then I Googled it, and boom, pops up St. Petka looking exactly like that. And I realized, you can take her. You dreamt. That means she's helping you. You prayed to her last night. So I dragged my mother in the car. I took her out. The priest brought her communion. She was hunched over, sitting on a bench. And I thought, how in the heck? Because it were 3 steps to my car. How in the heck am I going to get her back into my car? The people were leaving the church. I was by myself. Out of the blue, a Greek fellow, Leonidas, and another man came, and they lifted her up into my car. I didn't even ask for them. How do you explain that?
Isn't that lovely?
You don't.
Yeah. Somebody
The
tapped
saints
them
are
on the
alive.
shoulder and sent them over, right? That's exactly right.
Yeah.
The saints are paying attention.
are.
Clearly.
They
Clearly.
are.
Well, that is very beautiful. So you were in still North Carolina. Did you end up going to college in North Carolina, or what did you end up doing as you grew up?
Yes, I did. I finished college there, and then I got a master's degree in Washington, D.C. And then after that, my mother was already a widow. I lost my father suddenly from a heart attack, massive heart attack, and freshman in college. And my brother was working at that time actually as a resident in Philadelphia. He had graduated medical school, and he had convinced my mother to move to Philly so we could be together, which was so wonderful. And so when I finished graduate school, that's my family. That's all I have is a mom and a brother. My dad had passed away, so I moved up there, and I got a job in a children's museum. And that's where, Elissa, I met my husband on a blind date.
Oh,
So,
excellent.
I never thought I'd meet, but that was an answer to the prayer. I write that in my first book. It was a very funny thing, but I did pray for him, and
there he
he's
was.
pretty much what I had to pray for. So,
Well, there you go. Who set up the blind date?
thank God.
Who set up your date? Who
Well,
was the
my
matchmaker?
mother had I shouldn't say this, but back in the day, she was designing fur and leather coats. And one of my brothers, she had a business, and one of my brothers, his head resident, John Fitzgerald, who's my husband Tony's cousin, knew that. And he knew, because my mother didn't have a store, there wouldn't be store overhead, and he would get the stylish, all the New York elegant furs. So
Right, of course.
And his wife has just lost her father. So he asked my brother if, my mother would meet with his wife. So Tony's that made Tony, his grandmother ended up coming with her. So I met part of his family without meeting Tony, but they saw me sitting there. I was eating the Serbian dish, pasui. I never forget. I was watching Oprah Winfrey eating pasui, which is like chili beans. And the grandmother, she's about 4 foot whatever high, walks in and she goes, "Oh, we have a boy for you." And I'm like 24 or 23, I don't know. And I'm thinking, yeah, everybody's setting up my brother, because he's a physician, blah, blah, blah. But I didn't really believe her. But a couple months later, I came in from work. I was working in a museum in Philadelphia, and I hear my mother on the phone, and she goes, "Does he drink or do drugs?" I'm thinking, what the heck is she talking about? And I'm listening in, and it's Georgia, the cousin's wife, trying to fix me up with Tony.
Oh, that's
And
awesome.
then I said, is he older than me? So Mommy goes, is he older than Ariane? And then, he's only 8 months older, really. My dad was a lot older than my mom. I don't know why
Yeah.
I asked for that. But anyway, it was a blind date, and we hit it off. And then poor fellow, he went through that whole crowning. You know what it is
Oh,
like
yeah.
in the Serb church with those big, heavy crowns.
That's right.
Tony always says they're circular. They didn't fit my head. And then my kuma's throwing rose petals. He goes, my crown is falling off, and some woman is throwing a bush at me. That's what he said. I said, just smile and walk around the circles. He's a very patient man, to say
He
the least.
sounds adorable. Well, we're going to go to a quick break. I want to remind our audience that we're here with Ariane Trifunovic Montemuro, and I want to hear a little bit more about your husband and how he handled coming into the church overall, like after the wedding. How did that go? So we will be right back. Excellent.
Everyday Orthodox with Elissa Bjeletich will be back in a moment. Give Elissa and her guest a call at 855-237-2346. That's 855-AF Radio.
Are you thankful for the Orthodox Study Bible? If so, you might be interested in St. Athanasius Academy, the same organization that produced the Orthodox Study Bible. St. Athanasius Academy is fully online and offers college courses and homeschool studies. Learn more at www.saaot.edu. That's saaot.edu. St. Athanasius Academy is a proud supporter of Ancient Faith Radio.
Boldly proclaiming the truth of the risen Christ. This is Ancient Faith Radio, timeless Christianity 24 hours a day.
We're back with Everyday Orthodox with Elissa Bjeletich. Do you have a question for Elissa and today's guest? Call in now at 855-237-2346. That's 855-AF Radio. Here again is Elissa.
And welcome back to Everyday Orthodox. We're here tonight with Ariane Trifunovic Montemuro. And she was just telling a delightful story about marrying her husband who had not grown up Orthodox. And what was he saying? That he was standing there and his crown was falling off of his head and your kuma was just throwing bushes at him. The poor guy, did not quite know what was going on. I always joke that with the Orthodox service, the wedding service in particular, even if it's in English, we still have to hand out papers that translate it for our audiences because people don't know what's going on. Even if you can understand the words, it's so different from a Western wedding. How did he do after that? How did he feel about Orthodoxy? How was that?
Well, we had a Serbian, we had two priests. We had a Russian Orthodox priest in front of Tony who was speaking English, and in front of me, we had a Serbian Orthodox speaking Old Slavonic. But the funny thing was how perfect God is. The Russian Orthodox priest, some of you may remember Father Alexander Fedorenko, who was very much about a united Orthodox and English in the liturgies back in the day. He died in the 1990s, but Tony's grandfather built his parish house, so they all knew each other. So I had more Italians at the service. I had a lot of Italians come up to me and go, I had one lady say, "Oh my gosh, your wedding was like something out of Hollywood." And then another lady, of course I didn't know anything different, but a gentleman said, "Wow, I remember this is like the old church." And I think that on a deep level it resonated with them because I don't know when that Vatican II was or anything, but out of all the religions, we're really the closest with the split and everything with the Mother of God and the saints. So I think Tony still does feel very much at home. And but this was one thing, Elissa, you're going to enjoy that sticks out in my mind. You're newly married and you're really poor. You're just finishing medical school, Tony, and I'm working at this gallery up. And so we had this tiny little apartment. And every apartment we moved to, I'm always looking for the Eastern Wall. The first thing, I've got the icon up. That, I knew, that was something, because I didn't have information, but I had ritual. I watched what my mother did. So anyway, I'm hanging it up, and I remember one interesting thing, and I can't remember when it happened, but I remember when Tony said to me, "You guys don't question anything, do you?" And I thought, that's interesting. And no, I didn't. I just accept, and that be something in my blood or my roots. I accept this is what my parents did, this is what my grandparents, this is my great-great-grandparents, and beyond. And I thought that was an interesting comment because we don't have a Western mind. Mm-hmm. Think about it. Yep. We have an Eastern mind.
That's right. It's very different.
For thought there.
It really is. It's very different.
Question anything. Yeah.
Well, and I think that in the Western Christianity, there's a lot more intellectual, sorting things out and understanding why things happen this way. And you have to understand and assent to everything in your faith. And in Orthodoxy, it's not so much like that. It's a lot more mystical. It's a lot more focused on God's activity than our activity. So it's, it's interesting. Yeah. It's very different. I think that's really neat. That's a neat
mystery of God.
Observation. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So you went through school, you got married. What were you doing next?
Got married, and the first job Tony got was in Savannah, Georgia. Of course, we went down there, and oh Lord, I'm not gonna name names, but he had a very interesting man he worked for. That one time we went with his to the this is his first job in private practice, and his boss picks him up. We go to the opera, and he's wearing a cape, Elissa. So I said to Tony, I said, "Do you really want to stay in this?" And he said, "I think we're not as compatible." So then we ended up living in Charlotte for a while. And again, still no Serbian churches anywhere. I'm always going to the Greek churches. And when I'm in the Greek church, I'm sort of trying to fit in, but back then it's still pretty Greek. I remember a blonde woman saying to me, "I don't feel as ethnic. I'm a convert. I'm like you. You're blonde." And I'm thinking the blonde has died. And I'm thinking, so if I had dark hair, which I really do under this, you'd think I'd be more ethnic. She goes, "I wish I was ethnic." And I'm thinking, I am ethnic, but nobody thinks I am. But anyway, it was a very confusing time. And then we moved to Nashville. That was really amazing. And I set foot in St. Ignatius, and it was still the old church, and it felt very warm when I walked in, and it was the very first time, Elissa, I heard the liturgy in English. I heard chanting that, chants that my mother loved. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, all of that. And my tears were coming down. I understood, because many people don't realize Old Slavonic is not Serbian. It's more difficult. It's the old, language. And so here I am understanding the words. And then my mom probably thought, okay, she's becoming a fanatic. I was coming to every church service. I couldn't get enough. I was like, oh my God. Tony, at one point, I remember my father-in-law was here, and he goes, "Wow, this house looks like a church." He looks up from dinner. He's eating soup, and he goes, "Ariane, the house is starting to look like." So I've calmed down, but the excitement. If we don't know what we have before it's too late,
it's like, a beautiful thing, though, to have started with a love for the church already, but then to have this kind of interesting, invigorating experience where all of a sudden it just kind of exploded for you. That is really lovely. That's beautiful.
Yeah. And what we didn't talk about, Elissa, was I got off tangent. And I hate to say it, we all have our sins, whatever, they're private. But, maybe some people think I'm a little goody two-shoes, whatever I am, I don't care. But I did have the sin of wanting to know the future. And I think a lot of it came out of my father dying when I was 18. And I wanted to connect with him. Are you there? I just couldn't accept that. I wouldn't have a dad at my wedding. And so I've had my share of psychic readings, and I didn't even realize until I started to get to know St. Matrona that no. And St. Rachel of Borodino, no, you are not supposed to do this. Nobody told me that. You know, the Serbs, I've seen them do the coffee grounds. I'm going to have a lot of Serbs running after me. I love all of you guys, really. I'm one of you, really. But, you know, the coffee ground, one time I was in a fellowship hall. I'm not going to say what church, but, you know, hey, let's turn it over and read. I forget what mine was, but I think it's just we don't know. You know, we don't know. And then all of a sudden you hear the liturgy and you know what you've been given. Then you're like, wow. And then you learn more from the saints. You know, one of my favorite stories, Elissa, it was about 20 years ago, there was this LA Times story about this iconographer. He was really old, maybe in his 80s, and he was painting icons. And he couldn't find the right color for the robe of this, I don't know what saint it was now, it's so long ago, but I remember this in my mind. I'll never forget. It was a female saint. So he started talking to her and said, Saint so-and-so, I'm having trouble with your icon. Help me. And you know, him talking to her, that's what was a turning point for me. I'd started to go to St. Ignatius, and it was almost 20 years ago. When I heard that, I thought, oh my gosh, they are alive. And then with the whole thing about they're also your friends. I read that quote. You've seen it in my book. I have it. I know it by memory now. A true friend prays to God for his friend. A true friend cares about the salvation of a friend's soul, to draw a friend back from false ways and to set him on the true path. That's a precious friendship. The saints of God are man's greatest friends. Saint Nikolai Velimirovich. Then you realize, not only do we have the church and the Eucharist and the holy water and the holy oil and all this icons, but we have the saints. And even if we're alone, if every friend has rejected you, if you have a lousy marriage, a lousy relationship with your parents, a lousy whatever, and who hasn't experienced something, but the saints are always there like Christ. But sometimes I'm like intimidated, like I'm thinking I'm not just good enough. Christ is so bright. But the saints are like, come on, Ariane.
That's right. That's right. Well, and they're human, right? So you can look at that and say, okay, they're human too. They make mistakes. They're not perfect, but they are wonderful. And so they're saints.
They are.
You know, it is so helpful and so beautiful to have them with us. So I have a question for you. How did you get into writing books then? At what point did you decide that you wanted to write a book?
I'll tell you exactly how it happened, because it's pretty funny. I would have never thought I would write anything. It would never enter my mind. But standing in St. Ignatius, somewhere around 2007, 2008, I would stand there and listen to the liturgy. And of course, I need to be paying attention. But I would look at the different icons and I would hear, you need to write a book. You need to write a book about your experience being ethnic and then realizing what you've been given. Like you didn't fully realize. And then you did. You need to write a book. And I would talk back to the voice. I would go, but my husband makes a lot of jokes about how many voices Ariane has in her head. But anyway, the voice was not my own. And I would say, I don't know how to write. I have no idea how to write. So one day, St. Ignatius had this loaves and fishes. The teen kids would go down I went with my older son downtown Nashville to feed the hungry. And I thought, I don't want to tell anybody at St. Ignatius that I want to write a book, but I need help. I want to find somebody else so I looked for somebody. Loaves and Fishes was with Holy Trinity, the Greek church. So everybody there was from the Greek church. So the Greek priest walks in and I'm like, Father Gregory? And he walks by. He didn't hear me. And another lady walks by and, did you want Father Gregory? I said, yeah, I want to know if there's anybody that's an editor or who could help me getting started writing. I want to write a book. And the lady said, my husband here, Tim Weeks. So that's how it happened.
Just right there.
And then
that's
I didn't
amazing.
know the title. I didn't know what the title was. So I'm listening to the akathist in the car. And I hear, I shall remember thy holy name from generation to generation. Isn't that what we want for our kids, Elissa?
Yes,
Don't
absolutely.
we want them to remember God from generation to generation? How many times
That's
do you
right.
hear that in the Bible? So that was not me either. So it was truly that you know, the Lord speaks to us, but also the saints speak to us. You know, this is kind of, again, we're not supposed to analyze dreams, but I told my co-host on the podcast, Fran, I said, one night I had a dream of St. Matrona. It was a huge icon. She was wearing her green dress with the polka dots you see a lot in her icons. And she started looking at me, and her mouth didn't move, but it was like she was talking. She said, Ariane, when's the next podcast? And we had delayed, we had made a promise we'd do one every month when Bishop Longan blessed us to start, and we said we'll do one every month. And 2 months was going by, and 3 was, and then she goes, in the dream, St. Matrona said, get the next podcast on your calendar. And I woke up and I called Fran, and I said, I told her the dream, and then like a dope, Elissa, I said, do you know why would I have a dream of St. Matrona? And then he goes, yeah, and she's our patron saint of our podcast. Can you believe I forgot that for a minute? But they're watching. All of our saints.
They don't forget.
And we forget our guardian angels watching.
That's right. That's right. Absolutely. And they never forget. So that was your first book, I Shall Remember Thy Holy Name from Generation to Generation. And that's really kind of your story, the story of your family and of you and of your walk in the faith. What came up next after that one?
Well, and let me say one more thing about that book. That book was written to raise money for the Bjeletich Fund, which right. Father Nectarius Surface has raised money so much for the Bjeletich Monastery in
Tell us
Kosovo.
a little bit about that in case, I'm not sure that everyone knows about that. If you're in the Serbian Church in the United States, you've definitely heard of it. But if you're not, you may not have.
I'd be happy to. I'm going to quote Father Seraphim Bjeletich, who is a monk at New Gračanica Monastery in Chicago, Illinois. He always said that per square mile, that area, which was southern Serbia, we Serbs say it still is. Anyway, that area per square mile has more churches and monasteries historically than any place on the entire earth. So you have to think about, people don't think about battles in terms of spiritual. And of course, that's a threat to the devil, all these monasteries and churches. This has always been a sore point, Kosovo. Kosovo is the battle cry of the Serbian people. You know, it's who we are. It's in our blood. I mean, this area is sacred. It's like Serbia's Jerusalem, if you want to look at it that way. It's where and how we perceive ourselves to be Orthodox. Now, so many churches have been desecrated in the last 50 years, and nobody's really, it's very difficult to help, I'll say that, and the Serbs are suffering as it historically, just think about the war in the 1990s, they're worried about just getting on their feet, their individual families, so who's helping Kosovo? Well, this wonderful priest, Father Nectarius Surface, is not Serbian, but he might as well be. He got the St. Sava Award, and he has done so much. He goes there every year. He brings money, and I'm on the board of his fund to raise money for the area to help repair churches. And I mean, that's the area where you'll see nuns with guns. You know, they're hanging out. They're not leaving their land. They don't. If there's nobody left, they're going to be there, and they're guarding Holy Land. This is not about the mines, the richness of the soil. I mean, sure, there is all of that. This is about, it's a spiritual battle. And that's what the Serbs are proud to say, Kosovo is Serbia. And this wonderful priest, you just have to, if the listeners can just look at his website, www.thedechanifund, the THEDECANIFUND.org, just to give him a plug, because, I mean, providing daily lunches to schools, I mean, they do everything for youth. This is just real quick. Listen to this, Elissa. He went over there recently and he asked the Serbs in high school there, what do they want? can get them something. And they said, Father Nectarios, we want to go to Greece like the seniors. And he said, oh, yeah, you seniors want to have your high school trip, senior trip to the beaches in Greece. And they said, no, we want to go there because the churches are open. You know, the Serbian Orthodox little kids there get pelted by little stones on the school bus. It's still going on. So the fact that he's doing this, it really, really touched me. He's doing a great, great deed, and I hope people out there, if they feel inclined to help, do at least look his website up. But that's another reason why I wrote the book, because, I mean, the book is there to, teach people who the Serbs are, too. And we all need to learn from different Orthodox nations. Each nation has something to give us, the Russians, the Greeks. There's something to be learned, and it's beautiful, really.
Absolutely. Well, and I think I do want to mention to our listeners, we've put the website for this fund and also to look for your books and also, various different sites with which you're affiliated. We'll put them all up on Facebook so that people can find them later, especially that one, because that's really wonderful. So now you decided at some point to write another book, Debt of Love. How did that come about?
Well, this book really, even though I'm Serbian and I'm very proud to leave the first book behind for my kids to know their family history and roots, this book was more of a labor of my heart. I've always, my mother used to say when I was little, "You're not Russian. What is it with you and the everything Russian?" I know my love of Anna Pavlova, but I also in the 1970s, when I was, 7, 8, 9 years old, I remember looking through Robert Massey's book. My mother had a couple books on the Romanovs. Of course, I wasn't reading them as much as poring over the photos and feeling. I already knew each one of the family members back then. They weren't saints then, but I've always felt a very deep draw to them. And I felt sometimes and I'll be honest with you, Elissa, I would get angry, and even with some Orthodox people, because people, and it's not their fault, though. There's so much propaganda that's still floating around about the last Tsar. That's why in this new book I do little things like I put a picture of Lenin right next to the Tsar, and my headings for my photos are very minimal, because I don't want people to read as much as to look and feel. Feel not just with their mind, but feel with their heart, make that connection. And this family, especially now, the Romanovs are quintessential example of how to live in quarantine. I mean, I'm surprised we're not talking more about that on some level, because they were in the Ipatiev house for a number of months. And, first they found comfort looking out the window. They could see the top domes of the church and the cross. But as they switched off guards and made them more and more horrid and evil, they whitewashed the windows so they couldn't even look outside. But somehow this family still survived in such deep love. We have examples, as everybody knows, through all the diaries, and there's so many wonderful books out there. But I think my book is out there not to bring up something new historically, but it's to invite people to say, hey, have a relationship with them yourself, because guess what? They're saints now. God has decided that they're saints. And, each one of them have something different to offer us. And, sometimes I look in Tsaritsa Martyr Alexandra's eyes. You do see that deep sorrow, but I see such a great faith in her that it's so inspirational. And, each one of them gives us something to help us survive our lives. I know I need help, I'll be honest. I mean, some days it's like, really? I can't do this. And we need the saints. And this is not just one saint. You're getting a family package. I mean, it's an amazing thing. Wrap them up and sell them out. But I mean, it sounds awful saying it like that. But really, you're getting all these saints in one family. And to top it all off, God has allowed us to see photos. I do a little better. I'm a very visual person when I can see a real person I don't know why. I feel it's like St. Matrona the Blind. There's only a few pictures of her, but I feel so connected when I see one of those black and white pictures. I feel she's real. I mean, I know she is, but, we're still human, and we always have our doubts.
That's right. And it's not that we doubt that Saint Basil or Saint John Chrysostom or someone is not real.
Right.
But there is something very amazing about seeing the actual photograph of the actual face. There's a difference to it. It's very interesting, and it is one of the blessings of the modern age. Now, you mentioned that you're very visual, and I know we just have a few moments left, and I want to make sure that we talk about your art as well, because you do some really lovely artwork. And I would say in your work, I can tell that you love the saints. I know that you love the saints because so much of your work is portraits of the saints. And in fact, the first time I ever saw your work is up at Camp St. Sava in Jackson, California. Your portrait of St. Sebastian of Jackson, because that's his home. Your portrait of him is up there, and I saw it and I just loved it. It's very beautiful. And I know that Bishop Maxime enjoys your work very much. Tell me a little bit about your artwork.
Well, my artwork, again, I tell people, I know you know this, Elissa, but they are not icons. I call them Orthodox narratives because, again, I'm storytelling, just like the books. I'm telling a story. Anything you see of my paintings, I have stared at images of these people, these saints, for a long time before I even pick up the brush. I look at them and I feel them, and I've made a connection to them. Many times I stop, I remember doing the St. Sebastian, and I stopped and I wept because his eyes, he is such a humble human being. I mean, I never knew all the American cliches because my parents never said them, but what is it? Eyes speak 1,000 words, or maybe that's a picture.
Or like the windows to the soul, I think.
That's it. Eyes,
and you can see it. You can see his gentleness through his eyes. I totally agree. Yeah.
And it is there, the humility, and each saint has something different to give us, but my paintings are really storytelling, pure and simple. I'm trying to tell a story. With St. Sebastian, I'm going, oh my gosh, look here. He's the first Orthodox monk and saint in this country. I mean, look at him and look at his eyes. And let's not forget who he is. And let's look at the border of the frame around there. That comes from Deceni Monastery. I copied that, and that's the connection to Kosovo. Now, what is Kosovo? So again, I every part of the like I did a painting of St. Matrona you can see on the website. It's very simple and it's illustrative, but I included St. John Kronstadt in there because he said that she was the 8th pillar of Russia. He said that when she was 14 years old, and pointed her out in a crowd of so many thousands of people. He had those big liturgies, a lot of people coming, St. John Kronstadt. So each one of these saints has something to tell us. I'm very passionate about St. Matrona the Blind because she's helping everybody fight spiritual blindness. I mean, she saw better than any of us, but she didn't even have eyes. I mean, that's like God going, look here, and I obviously can't speak for God, but here's a woman with no eyes, you all. And she knows who I am, and you have eyes, and you can see, and you may not know. You see the point? Yes. There's that verse from Matthew, for the hearts of this people have grown dull. Their ears are hard of hearing, and their eyes have closed. I mean, so much of this is happening in the world, and a saint like St. Matrona is an amazing person. Everybody should look at her life and read about it. So my painting is like me waving, going, hey, I have this finite time on earth, and I'm going to express myself, not for me. I don't care. Don't remember me. But look, don't forget her. Let me tell you the story. And people learn best, I think, Elissa, with stories.
Oh, I think
rather
you're
than
right.
Facts.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Bullet points are not anywhere near as good as a well-crafted narrative that people can really grab onto and remember.
I agree. And I think There's so many saints. Even now, who's the saint? Saint Nicephorus, the leper. He's coming out. People in Greece are having dreams of him and confirming that he's saying in the dreams that he's aware of what's going on with this pandemic, but encouraging people that his intercessory prayers are available to all of us faithful believers. We need to use these saints. That's another thing I'm very passionate about. It's like we need to use them. They're weapons. They're not just there. Let's not forget these people. The Tsar martyr and his family, how they were brutally killed. And then somebody's going to say, well, he was bloodthirsty. That's like, it pains me to hear that. I'm like, look at his eyes.
It is. But, it's no surprise, right? It's no surprise. It makes sense that that whenever you have a martyr, whenever you have a saint, there's always going to be some pushback from the enemy there. And so, we'll make it through.
So true.
But,
you are right.
Ariane, this is, and with your help, in fact, because of your Debt of Love book will help with that, I'm sure. And I do want to let our audience know we are putting up links so that you can find the Debt of Love book. And from generation to generation, you have the Fellowship of St. Matrona the Blind, that website, your art site. We'll put them all up on our Facebook page.
Thank you.
Ariane, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thank you. May I say one more quick thing? Within the next year, I'm actually in the last chapter right now. I'm finishing a book on St. Matrona the Blind called St. Matrona the Blind, Your Friend and Our Friend in Christ. And that'll be done.
Beautiful.
Same format as Debt of Love.
Well, let me know, and I'll put that up on the Facebook page when it's available.
Thank you, Elissa.
And so, thank you so much, and thank you to our audience for joining us. We'll see you next Sunday night on Everyday Orthodox.
Honored to be here. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.